Recently, in the midst of the Me Too movement, the U.S. military has once again been forced to address its sexual assault problem. Joining us now to talk more about legislation aimed at dealing with this issue, please welcome New York Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, U.S. Army veteran BriGette McCoy, and former Chief U.S. Air Force Prosecutor, retired Colonel Don Christensen, everybody. Welcome to the show. Senator, I'm gonna kick it off with yourself. This is a strange issue that seems like it shouldn't have anyone who's against us. Could you explain what the problem is and where we currently stand right now?
The problem is, for 20 years, the Department of Defense has said zero tolerance for sexual assault in the military. But the last time they surveyed this, they estimated there were over 15,000 sexual assaults, not even including civilians and spouses. And of those sexual assaults, only just over 6,000 are reporting. And those 6,000, so few cases actually go forward to trial, and so few cases actually end up in conviction. And we need a military justice system that is worthy of the sacrifice that these men and women make every day. And unfortunately, the DoD is unwilling to change how they prosecute these cases. And one of the things that all of us believe in is that it should be given to trained military prosecutors to make the decision about whether a crime's been committed, not commanders who aren't even lawyers, who may not be trained, and who may have biases. Because right now, the system is failing our service members.
But now there are people who have come out against your proposal and said, the military handles military issues. Why are civilians trying to get involved? You don't know what's best for the military. Why would you step in with this legislation that aims to bring in a foreign body to try and in some way influence what's happening in the military?
So you're not. You're actually telling someone like Commander Christensen, who was the prosecutor, that he gets to look at the evidence because he's a prosecutor, decide whether a crime's been committed, and decide whether to move that case to trial, to court-martial. Right now, when a commander makes that decision, they may know the perpetrator, they may know the victim. It's kind of like when your boss is deciding if two people working at the same company, if one committed a sexual assault against the other. It's like one service member said, it's your dad deciding whether to punish you or your brother. It is not fair, it's biased, and the results are so bad. There's not enough cases that are going to conviction. And unfortunately, a lot of commanders, they use non-judicial punishment, and sometimes they'll just kick the service member out, putting a serial rapist into the civilian world. So they're just not getting the job done. So despite this stated zero tolerance, we have as many sexual assaults as we've had over the last several years. We have more sexual assaults reported today than ever, and the rate of conviction is going down, not going up.
Colonel, on your end, you worked in the military, you served, and you were involved in prosecuting cases. What were the obstacles you found when it came to sexual assault? Why do you feel that this needs to be assigned to a special group of people and not currently the way it's done?
Senator Gillibrand and I both use the same term, professionalization. The military justice system is not professional. It's controlled by a commander who might be a great pilot, might be a great infantry officer, but he or she knows absolutely nothing about prosecuting sexual assault. I did it for 23 plus years. Sexual assault is the most difficult kind of case you can prosecute. It's not something you can pick up, get a PowerPoint slide briefing, and now I'm an expert on prosecuting cases. If you just look at the numbers, less than 4% of allegations in the military result in a conviction. 96% of the people that have been accused of a sexual assault walk free. And that's just not winning.
But you said you were involved in prosecutions for 20 plus years. Doesn't that mean that there is a system in place that's working?
There's a system, but it's not working. And the reason it doesn't work is because when I was a prosecutor, I didn't make the decision whether a case went to trial or not. A commander made that decision. A commander who might be great at navigating the ship through the Straits of Hormuz or something like that, but knows absolutely nothing about prosecuting cases. A military prosecutor has almost zero authority. The decision whether to go to trial, the decision whether to have a plea agreement, the decision to appeal a case, the decision to drop charges or add charges are all made by commanders.
Right. Now, BriGette, on your side, you not only served, but you have come forward with a very painful story of your own experience with sexual assault in the military. How did you process that information, and how did it inform why you support this legislation?
Well, my situation happened in the 90s, in the 87 to 91. And when I got out, I was exited out because I reported sexual harassment. So within a 90-day period, I was retaliated against and then subsequently put out of the military. So my clearance, my training, all of those things were completely didn't hold up against me saying, I had been assaulted, and now, I want something done about it. Instead of them doing something about it, then I was exited out of the military.
Who retaliated against you?
My command, my first sergeant, the commanders, they, like I said, I had to sign paperwork to be put out of the military, to get out of the military. So they basically, once the conversation happened that I had been harassed, they wanted to know why and what I wanted. And I said I just didn't want to work with someone who was going to treat me that way.
Right.
And so from that process, they started giving me extra duty and extra things outside of the scope of my job, creating just this atmosphere where my peers were questioning, like, what's going on with you, where my subordinates were questioning, like, my authority. And then, like I said, it ended up being, me getting out of the military.
It's a really painful story that surprised me when reading about it, because you also discover that in the military specifically, this is an issue that is affecting more men than women, which is not often the case with sexual assault in general society. Is there a reason that this happens, or is there a reason that people are resistant to it because of that?
I don't think so. I think they just don't want to change how they do something. Unfortunately, the Department of Defense didn't want to integrate the military. They didn't want women to serve. They didn't want women in combat. They didn't want to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And every time one of these things happened, they had the same excuse. It somehow undermines good order and discipline.
Right.
Well, if you have nearly 15,000 incidents of rape a year, you don't have good order and discipline, first of all. And right now, there's no transparency and there's no accountability. And what BriGette said was important. She was retaliated against for reporting that she was sexually assaulted and sexually harassed. Retaliated. She's the one who was forced out of the military. That happens over and over again. In fact, 59% of all people who reported these cases said they were retaliated against. A third from peers, a third administrative, and a third professional. So this is a huge problem, and they're not taking it seriously. They're not putting in place the structure that would allow Commander Christensen to make these decisions about whether to go to trial, because he's a professional prosecutor who knows what to do.
Right.
And they're just doing what's best for them. And unfortunately, when I've looked at these cases, because I pour through them and look for just evidence of what's going on, when it's he said, she said, when he says it's consensual and she said it's rape, 1 year in the 4 major bases, 86% of the time, they believed him that it was consensual and did not move the case forward. And so you don't have 86% of false reporting. It's just not true. And so they just don't have the level of sophistication and knowledge to understand which cases should go forward. And what we've seen over the last several years, despite the spotlight on this issue, the percentage of cases proceeding to court-martial is going down, and the percentage of convictions is going down, even though you have the record number of reported rapes this year.
You have support for this legislation, I believe more than half of the Senate, from all sides. I mean, even Ted Cruz is supporting this, and that's true. It's an issue that shouldn't be divisive, and yet it seems to be. What is the hang-up, and what do you hope will be different this time around?
Well, you just have a choice. You're either going to believe the commanders or you're going to believe the survivors. Because when you ask the survivors, the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans of America, they just did a poll and they asked survivors, would you be more likely to report if your commander wasn't making the decision, if it wasn't within the chain of command? 40% women, men said yes, they would be more likely to report. So we know from the survivors, we know from BriGette, she knows that the command structure doesn't necessarily have her back. If she was harassed and assaulted by people senior to her, in both instances, they were in her chain of command and senior to her, and she wants to know, are they going to believe me or someone senior to me? The chain of command is inviolate.
Right.
Tell what the perspective of survivors is.
Well, when you go into those spaces, they've already decided. They just want to hear what you have to say, so that they can determine, I perceive, how they're going to punish you. When I went in and spoke to my commander and said exactly what had happened, he said that I had misunderstood that my senior enlisted professional was trying to help me to advance my career, and that I, what did I want from from reporting this case? And again, I just basically said the same thing that I told you earlier. And so for me, the retaliation was ongoing. It was much longer than the actual event itself. Right. So you have an event that happens, and then from that event, you have the daily, you go to work, you live with these folks, you eat with these folks, you go to PT with them, you work with them. So it's not like you get a break from the retaliation, like you just go home and you don't have to see them again for another 8 hours. So it is constant, it's ongoing. And survivors like myself leave the military with, these different types of, the personality disorder, and they're not being able to get,
Colonel Christensen, BriGette is talking about how when the women are pushed out, when the survivors are pushed out, male and female, they are often given dishonorable discharges. They're also often given something in the record that said it was their fault, that they had a pre-existing personality disorder that made them somehow perceive this to be a rape or an assault. Colonel, talk a little bit about what actually the percentage of women what happens to their careers when they report these sexual assaults.
Sure, Senator. So 1/3 of women who report a sexual assault in the military are forced out of the military within 7 months of reporting. 1/3. And their discharge characterization is significantly lower than what the average service member receives. That follows them throughout the rest of their life. They lose their GI Bill, they lose veterans benefits. We are at a time where this country cannot recruit enough qualified people, and yet we are forcing out dedicated women who want to serve purely because they've been sexually assaulted and their command won't believe them.
It's interesting, when the president was asked about this issue, he said this is a reason why women shouldn't be in the military, because I guess that's the way you solve the issue. With the commanders deciding this, once a prosecution has gone through and once you found somebody guilty, is it still possible for the chain of command to eliminate that?
Well, up until a few years ago, and thankfully Senator Gillibrand and some other senators got this changed, a commander could have somebody convicted of rape and they just throw the conviction out and say, I want that person to stay in my unit.
And so now that changed over time, but you're still looking for more changes.
Yes.
And the resistance, I'm assuming, has to do with the perception of being anti-military. How do you try and propose something like that without seeming like you're going against the military?
Well, I think this is the most pro-military bill you could have. You're on the side of service members because you want these men and women serving at their fullest capacity. And if you're a rapist, you're most likely a recidivist. You're a predator. Rape is a crime of violence. It is not a crime of romance. We've had commanders say things, well, really, the problem is the hookup culture. The hookup culture has nothing to do with rape in the military. We had another senator say, oh, it's really just hormones. It has nothing to do with hormones. This is rape. It is a crime of predation. It is a violent crime, and it's happening to men and women. And if we are not standing by our service members and protecting them after, BriGette, how many years of training did you have before you were literally pushed out because it was too inconvenient to prosecute her harasser and her assaulter?
I had 3 years of military training, top secret SCI clearance, and in the middle of the Gulf War, I was exited out of the military.
When there was a shortage of personnel who had her qualifications.
When we look at moving forward, BriGette, as somebody who went through this, unfortunately, someone who's experienced this firsthand, what would you say your biggest concerns are? Why do you really feel that this is important? Why does it need to happen?
Well, it needs to happen so that one, it absolutely needs to stop. Our military has some of the best people that come out of the communities and want to serve our country.
Right.
And so to go into the military and then have someone that's supposed to be have your back to harm you in that way, it's horrible. But what I would want to see is that the Military Justice Improvement Act to be passed to remove the process out of the chain of command, because
Right.
that is where a lot of the, the ongoing challenges are, because one person, you're going to, and saying this person is the one that harmed me, but he or she could be the person that's pals with the commanding officer. So we want to stop that completely. The other part that I would say is to have anyone who's been convicted to be on a list saying that they're a predator, that they're a sexual predator.
So that they don't go into the world having the,
Yes,
I
absolutely.
guess, all of the accolades of being in the military when in fact
Yes.
they're a person
Hiding in plain
society.
sight.
Right. It's a powerful issue. Senator, what's going to happen now? Where do you go from here?
Well, service members deserve a vote. We've asked for a vote the last 2 years and have been denied that vote. At a minimum, they deserve a vote, an up or down vote on this reform. We've done literally every small ball, incremental change you could possibly do over the last 5 years. Anything that anybody was willing to agree to, we passed through our committee and got passed. This is the one reform that survivors have asked for over and over and over again. It's the one reform that professionalizes the military. It's the one reform that puts the decision in the hands of a trained prosecutor who's been doing it for 25 years. And Colonel Christensen has recommended this based on his years of experience in these cases, that if he can just decide it based on the evidence, if a trained prosecutor in the military can make it based on the evidence alone, not on bias, not on who they like more, not on who they perceive as more valuable, then you will end more of these cases in conviction, more of these cases will go to trial, justice will be possible. Today, there's no transparency, there's no accountability, and there's been no justice, and our military members deserve a vote. So call your senators, ask them for a vote. Go to KirstenGillibrand.com, it'll tell you how to do that.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, BriGette McCoy, and Colonel Don Christensen, everybody.